Hello and welcome to the Escape English. Have you ever loved someone so much that your heart hurts just thinking about losing them? Today's story is about deep love, terrible fear, and a father's greatest loss. Listening to highly emotional stories is one of the best ways to improve your English. When you feel connected to the characters, your brain naturally absorbs the words. You will remember the vocabulary because you will deeply feel the story. Please find a quiet place, take a deep breath, and let us begin our journey. My name is Arthur Hayes. I am a baker. For 30 years, my life has been very simple and very quiet. Every morning, I wake up at 3 o'clock. The world is dark and silent. I walk down the wooden stairs of my house to the small bakery on the ground floor. I mix flour, water, salt, and yeast. I use my hands to push and fold the dough. The smell of warm, fresh bread is the smell of my entire life. I have always loved this safe, warm place. I have never wanted to travel. I have never wanted adventure. I only wanted peace. But my son, Toby, was completely different. Looking back now, the memories of him as a little boy are so clear in my mind. My beautiful wife died when Toby was only 2 years old. It was a sudden illness. After she passed away, my heart was broken into a million pieces. Toby was the only light left in my dark world. He was my only son. I promised myself I would always protect him. I kept him close to me in the bakery. I remember giving him small pieces of dough to play with. He would sit on the flour-covered floor, laughing and making tiny, ugly loaves of bread. Those were the happiest days of my life. However, as Toby grew older, he did not want to stay in the bakery. We lived in a small town, right next to a wild, cold ocean. While I hated the dangerous waves, Toby loved them. He loved to watch the Coast Guard helicopters fly over the water. He wanted to be a hero. He wanted to save people. I still remember the day he told me his dream. He was 18 years old. He stood in my bakery, tall and strong, and said, "Dad, I am going to join the Coast Guard. I am going to be a rescue pilot." I smiled at him, but inside, I was terrified. A father's job is to keep his child safe. How could I let him fly over the freezing, angry ocean into terrible storms? But I knew I could not stop him. He had his mother's brave heart. So I watched him train. I watched him get his uniform. I was the proudest father in the world. Every time he went to work, I played. I counted the hours until he came back home. My life became a circle of waiting. I baked my bread, and I waited for my boy to return. For 3 years, he always came home. He saved many lives. He became a young hero in our town. But then came the second Tuesday of November. The memory of that day still makes my hands shake. The morning was wrong. The sky was not blue or gray. It was an ugly, dark yellow. The air felt heavy, like it was hard to breathe. The seagulls were not flying. They were hiding. The radio announcer spoke with a fast, nervous voice. A massive winter storm was coming from the north. It was going to be the biggest storm our town had seen in 50 years. Toby had the day off from work. I was so happy about that. I thought we were safe. I closed the bakery early. We put heavy wooden boards over the glass windows. We brought extra firewood into the house. By 6 o'clock in the evening, it was completely dark outside. The wind started to howl. It sounded like a wild animal screaming around our house. We sat at the small wooden table in our warm kitchen. We were safe inside. I made hot soup and brought out a fresh loaf of my best bread.
Toby was smiling. He was telling me a funny story about his friends at the rescue station. I felt a deep, warm peace in my chest. My boy was home. He was safe with me. The terrible storm could not touch us. Then, the noise happened. It was a sharp, loud beep. It came from the small black pager on Toby's belt. Beep, beep, beep. It was the emergency signal. Someone was dying out there in the black, freezing ocean. Toby stopped talking. His smile vanished. He looked down at the pager, and then he looked up at me. The wind crashed against the house, shaking the walls. I stared at my only son, and a cold, dark terror grabbed my heart. Toby stood up instantly. His chair scraped hard against the wooden floor. He did not say a word. He grabbed his pager. He read the tiny screen. His face changed completely. He was no longer my boy eating warm soup. He was a soldier. He was a rescue pilot. "It is a fishing boat, Dad," he said. His voice was too calm. "The Blue Mary. They lost their engine. They are taking on water." I stood up too. My legs felt weak. "Toby, no. Listen to the wind. Listen to it." The wind screamed. Louder. It hit the roof like a giant fist. The glass windows rattled behind the wooden boards. The whole house shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. "It is a Category 5 storm," I said. My voice was shaking. "No one can fly in this weather. It is suicide. You cannot go." Toby walked quickly to the hallway. He pulled his heavy yellow jacket from the hook. He pulled on his thick, waterproof boots. "I have to go, Dad. There are 5 men on that boat. They have families. They will die in the freezing water." I followed him into the dark hallway. My heart was beating too fast. I grabbed his arm. I squeezed his yellow jacket. I did not want to let go. I wanted to lock the heavy door. I wanted to hide my only son. "Toby, please," I begged. Tears filled my eyes. "The ocean is completely black. The waves are 50 feet high. Your helicopter will crash. Stay here. Please stay." He looked at me. His eyes were sad, but very firm. He put his large, warm hands over my shaking hands. He pulled my fingers away from his jacket. "Dad," he said softly, "you bake bread to feed people. That is your job. This is my job. I pull people from the dark." He zipped up his thick jacket. He grabbed his helmet and his radio. He reached for the handle of the front door. The storm exploded. Into the house. It was not just wind. It was freezing rain and biting sea salt. The force knocked me backward. The cold was shocking. It hit my face like ice. The noise was deafening. It sounded like a massive train rushing through our small hallway. Toby turned to me one last time. He yelled over the terrible noise. "I love you, Dad. Keep the oven warm for me." He ran out into the black night. He disappeared into the heavy rain in 1 second. I tried to yell back, "I love you," but the wind pushed the words back into my throat. I pushed the heavy front door with all my strength. My muscles burned. I finally closed it. I locked it. Suddenly, the house felt totally empty. It felt like a cold tomb. I walked back to the kitchen. His bowl of soup was still warm. His empty chair was pushed away from the table. I sat down and covered my face with my hands. I could not cry. I was too afraid to cry. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 7 o'clock. The waiting began. Every minute felt like a terrible hour. I started to pace around the kitchen. I walked back and forth. The storm outside got much worse. I could hear heavy tree branches breaking in the yard. I could hear heavy things hitting the roof. The lights,
in the kitchen started to flicker. They went dark for a second. They came back. Then they went dark again. I could not stand the silence inside. I turned on my small battery radio. I tuned it to the local Coast Guard frequency. I wanted to hear his voice. I needed to hear the helicopter. Static noise filled the room. Crackle, hiss, pop. "Rescue 1, this is base," a voice said through the heavy static. "Do you see the boat?" I stopped walking. I held my breath. I leaned close to the small radio on the table. "Base, this is Rescue 1. Toby's voice came through. It was hard to hear. The background noise was awful. The helicopter engine roared loudly. "We are in the air. The wind is extreme. Visibility is 0. We are flying blind." My stomach twisted into a tight, painful knot. Flying blind, over an angry ocean, in the total dark. "Copy, Rescue 1. Be very careful," the base said. For 20 long minutes, I listened to the awful static. The storm outside was destroying the town. The lights in my house flickered one last time and died completely. I was sitting in total darkness. The only light in the room came from the small green screen of the radio. Then Toby's voice came back. It was fast. It was panicked. "Base, we have a massive problem. The wind shear is too strong. We are losing altitude. The tail rotor is failing." I grabbed the radio with both hands. No, I whispered in the dark. "Pull up, Rescue 1. Pull up now," the base operator yelled. "We can't. We are dropping too fast. Brace for impact. Brace." A horrible screeching sound ripped through the radio speaker. It sounded like metal tearing apart. Then a loud pop. Then complete silence. "Rescue 1, respond," the base operator said. His voice was shaking now. "Rescue 1, do you copy?" Nothing, just the soft hiss of static. "Toby," I whispered into the dark, empty kitchen. "Toby, please answer." The radio remained silent, but outside, the storm laughed and screamed, tearing our world apart. I stared at the small green light of the radio. The static hissed, a soft, cruel sound in the freezing kitchen. My mind simply stopped working. I could not process the silence. My brain refused to accept the horrible metal-tearing sound I had just heard. "He is fine," a small, desperate voice whispered inside my head. "Toby is an expert. He landed safely on the water. They are floating. They are waiting for the storm to pass." Fear is a very strange thing. When it becomes too large, your mind builds a wall to protect you. I sat in the pitch-black room for an hour, entirely frozen, building a wall of impossible hope. I told myself that the radio just broke. That was all, just a broken radio. But my hands knew the truth. They were shaking. Violently, the cold of the dead house began to seep into my bones. I needed to move. I needed to do something, or my mind was going to shatter into a million pieces. I stood up on weak legs. I found a small box of matches and lit an old oil lantern. The yellow light threw long, jumping shadows against the walls. Without thinking, my feet carried me down the wooden stairs to the bakery. The bakery was my sanctuary. It was the only place in the world where I felt control. When the world outside was chaotic, I could always measure flour. I could always add water. I could always make something good. I put the lantern on the wooden counter. The bakery was freezing. The ovens were dead because the power was out. But I did not care. I just needed to feel the dough. I needed the familiar rhythm. I poured heavy bags of flour into the large metal mixing bowl. I added salt. I added yeast. I poured in the water. I plunged my bare hands into the cold, sticky mixture. As I pushed and folded the heavy dough, my tears finally began to fall. They dropped silently into the bowl. I did not wipe them away. I just kept pushing the dough. Push, fold, push, fold. With every movement, a different memory of Toby flashed behind my eyes. I remembered his small fingers covered in sugar. I remembered the proud look on his face when he wore his yellow rescue jacket for the first time. I remembered the exact sound of his laugh. It was a loud, full laugh that always filled the entire house. My chest hurt so much that it was hard to breathe. Inside my head, I began to bargain with the universe. I prayed to any power that would listen. Take me, I thought fiercely. I am an old man. I have lived my life. My life is just a quiet bakery. His life is out there. He saves people. Take my life and give him back. Please, just let him walk through that door. The hours dragged on like heavy chains. Midnight passed, then 2 in the morning, then 4. I kneaded batch after batch of dough in the dark, piling it on the tables. The dough would never bake without the ovens, but I could not stop my hands. If I stopped, the silence would win. I would have to face the terrible reality waiting for me. I focused purely on the physical pain in my tired arms and the smell of the raw yeast. I wanted to stay in this dark, quiet bubble forever, because as long as I was waiting, Toby was still alive in my mind. As long as the sun did not rise, the truth did not exist. But time does not stop for a broken heart. Slowly, the terrible howling wind began to quiet down. The violent storm was finally losing its energy. The pitch-black windows of the bakery slowly turned a dark, bruised purple, and then a cold, pale gray. Dawn was breaking. Morning had arrived. The storm was over. I stood still, my hands covered in dried white flour. I looked at the front door of the bakery. The silence of the morning was heavier than the noise of the storm. The terrible, agonizing wait was coming to an end. Then I heard it. It was not the sound of a key turning in the lock. It was not the fast, happy footsteps of my son coming home. It was a slow, formal, and heavy knock on the thick wooden door. Knock, knock, knock. My heart stopped completely. Every muscle in my body froze. I stared at the door, and the wall of hope in my mind collapsed into dust. I knew, before I even took a single step toward the entrance, my shattered soul knew exactly who was standing on the other side. I wiped the white flour from my hands. I used an old towel. I walked slowly to the front door. The wood was cold. I turned the metal lock. It made a small click. I opened the door. 2 men stood outside in the gray morning light. They wore dark blue coats. It was the Coast Guard uniform. Their clothes were very wet. Rain dripped from their sleeves. They did not look at my face. They looked down at the ground. Slowly, both men took off their hats. They did not speak. They did not have to. I know, I said. My voice was very quiet. It did not sound like my own voice. The older man looked up. His eyes were red. "Mr. Hayes," he said softly, "the helicopter went down in the water. They found the pieces this morning. There were no survivors. I am so sorry." I did not cry. My tears were already gone. I just nodded my head. I looked past the men. I looked at the quiet street. The storm was gone. The town was safe. "Did they save the boat?" I asked. The man nodded. "Yes." Toby got the rescue line down. "The 5 fishermen are safe. Your son saved them before the wind took his helicopter." "Okay," I whispered. Thank you for telling me. I closed the door slowly. I walked back into the bakery. It was so quiet. The sun was coming through.
Windows. The light touched the large piles of dough on the tables. The power came back on. The ovens made a low humming sound. They were getting warm. I looked at the dough. It was ready. I did not go upstairs. I did not go to sleep. I put the dough into the warm ovens. I baked the bread. I baked all day. When the bread was done, I opened the bakery door. I gave the warm bread to the people in the town. I fed the families. I fed the people my son died to protect. My house is very quiet now, but every morning I wake up at 3 o'clock. I mix the flour, I add the water, I bake the bread, and I remember my brave boy. Now it is time to learn the vocabulary from our story. Learning new words through a story helps you remember them forever. Let us look at some difficult words from today's tragic story. I will explain their meanings in very simple English so you can understand them easily. Rescue means to save someone from a very dangerous or bad situation. In our story, Toby was a rescue pilot. This means his job was to fly his helicopter and save people who were in danger on the ocean. If a cat is stuck in a high tree and you bring the cat down safely, you rescue the cat. Terrified means to be very, very afraid or scared. It is much stronger than just being scared. When Arthur thought about his son flying in the dark storm, he was terrified. If you see a big, dangerous animal in the wild, you do not just feel fear. You feel terrified. Your heart beats fast, and you want to run away. Survive means to continue to live, especially after a very dangerous event, a terrible accident, or a hard time. In the story, the Coast Guard officer said there were no survivors. A survivor is a person who lives after an accident. The 5 fishermen on the boat lived. They survived the terrible storm. Static is the sharp, crackling noise you hear on a radio or a television when there is no clear signal. When Arthur listened to his small battery radio, he heard a lot of static because the storm was blocking the clear sound. It sounds like hiss or crackle. It is a bad, uncomfortable noise when you are trying to hear someone's voice. A sanctuary is a very safe place. It is a place where you feel protected, peaceful, and calm. The world outside can be loud, dangerous, or stressful, but inside a sanctuary, you are safe. For Arthur, his small bakery was his sanctuary. When he felt terrible fear, he went to his bakery to feel safe and calm. Knead means to push, press, and fold dough with your hands to make bread. The K in this word is silent. You pronounce it exactly like the word knead. When you make bread, you must use your strength to knead the wet flour and water together. Arthur kneaded the dough to stop his hands from shaking. Now it is time for shadowing practice. Shadowing is a great way to improve your English speaking. I will say a short, emotional sentence. You must listen and then repeat exactly after me. Try to copy my emotion and my voice. Do not just read. Speak out loud. Let us begin. I am a baker. My life is very quiet. I loved my son. He was my only boy. He wanted to be a hero. He wanted to save people. I was so proud of him. The storm was very strong. He walked out the door. I waited in the dark. I opened the heavy door. He is not coming home, but he saved them. I will always remember him. Great job. Practice this every day, and your speaking will sound very natural and beautiful. Thank you so much for listening to the Escape English today.
This was a very sad story, but it was also a story about true love and deep bravery. Parents do everything they can to protect their children, but sometimes children grow up to protect the world. Before you go, please answer these 2 questions in the comments below. What is your sanctuary? Where is the place you go to feel safe and calm? Have you ever been terrified of a big storm? Tell me your story. I read all of your comments, and I love practicing English with you. Keep studying, keep practicing, and keep your heart strong. See you next time.